Games. Board games. We might be talking about all sorts of things, but we're not gonna shout. Here we are. We'll take some bows and we're going to probably have no rows because we are friends. I like to think. Here is Bruce Vogue, and Bruce Vogue thinks and talks about party games and all sorts of things. And we'll start being more normal after I finish singing. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good whatever it is, wherever you are. 10 a.m. is UK time for Bessie Beats and Board Game Bladder, episode 989. Who is Bruce H. Vogue? That's what we're asking today, because you are someone who's done work for all sorts of companies, North Star Games in the past. I know that's not in your bio, but I believe you still got a good relationship with Dominic and the folks there.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That was a business. I was proud to work for North Star Games for quite a while, and then, pardon me, and I apologize to everyone. I'm going to be coughing just a little bit. I'm still coming through kind of the end of a COVID-19 thing, so it's not terrible. But every once in a while, if I don't get to a drink fast enough, you're going to hear me cough. But no, it was money was running out. And I can tell you, in the essential pieces of making a board game, of physically printing a board game, a guy who does social media and talks to people who have podcasts just did not fall as a major priority in keeping the company running. So,
I mean, it's had some major restructuring, but you
yes,
have been parts of the industry. You've been chatting about party games and games
absolutely.
that you take to parties for quite a while with the Party Gamecast, featuring the
hmm
Party Gamecast. And I think that that's the first way we interacted, because I sent you a little thing for In a Bind
Yep.
back when it was called In a Bind, and now Yogi.
I think I have a weird promo version of that that's
Have
like
you got In a
13
Bind?
cards.
Oh wait, you've got the tiny one, the one with 10 cards.
I have the little
Oh,
teeny
that
tiny
was
one.
a freebie that they gave away with some of the things flipped, and I think it was like 6 cards from that deck and 6 cards that technically aren't in that deck. But it was like a, hey, here's something we can give to people at conventions to get it to be bigger. But it was, I love the fact that you're actually talking about games that sometimes gets ignored, frankly. Because, yeah, there's the casual games insider, but there's all sorts of people who are like, hey, we care about games, and you can be
Mhm.
serious about casual games. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, that's part of the reason. So if you follow sort of our trajectory, we fall apart and fall off the world for a year and then pop back up and then fall off the world. And a lot of times when people talk to me, they often say to me, well, why are you even pretending to keep it alive? Why are you know like you clearly are pod fading? And you're not wrong. Anybody who makes that observation is 100% correct. But what keeps us coming back, what makes us say like we got to try to keep doing this, is the same reason we started it a million years ago, is that they just don't get the exposure. No one, like every once in a while, a major mega hit comes along. Code Names comes out and everybody jumps on Code Names. Oh my God, it's such a great party game, which I would argue, I don't even know that I agree with that statement. But
Is
everybody,
that because you feel like Codenames is too quiet to be a party game?
way too
What's the
quiet,
problem?
way too quiet. So for me, party games, one of the things we always try to figure out on the Party Gamecast is like, what are our qualifications, right? Can there,
Mm-mm.
because you get to this weird, especially when you close down the space like we have, you
Mm-mm.
really get to these artsy fartsy edge case questions where you're like, well, can there be a one player party game? What does the minimum have to be? What are the things I need to see? And we've kind of decided over the years we needed to see at least 3 people. Not that if you presented me like a really, really raucous thing, maybe I wouldn't be willing to bend my terms a little bit. But we
Mm-mm.
kind of feel like 3 is the lowest you can get to. Probably you could make a case for the right 2-player game. I wouldn't necessarily fight you if you gave me something where I looked at it and went, that's it. But one of the things we decided was there had to be some amount of volume. And
Yeah.
if there wasn't an amount of volume, there had to be an amount of interaction. That's not to say that you couldn't have a silent game where people like intertwined limbs, or there was a communication through facial structure, or of course, a game like charades is, a clear, easy easy wicket, easy ball and strike to tell is definitely a party game. But what we normally want to see, like a certain amount of raucousness, which is kind of the way we've decided to phrase it over the years, is it needs to look like a party. And Codenames is like, and I'm going to ask one question because we didn't cover this at a time. What are we doing with language? How clean do I have to make?
Like, you know what? It's fine. Just be yourself. And
Okay.
I'm going to put a thing. I would prefer keep it PG-13.
Okay, then I might extend and use my one F word sometime soon, and then I'll probably keep it pretty clean the rest of the time.
Okay.
But like Codenames to me is 10 people in quiet contemplation as one person yells "fuck." And that's what that game is, and it's not more than that. And the problem is, that is its most raucous. Is that so? To me, I find it very hard.
And hey, Black Sheep. And I like what you're saying about the definition of party games. And I want to be clear, when we define things, it's not to denigrate stuff that doesn't fit that definition. I mean, Codenames is a brilliant game.
Yes.
And, talking about other stuff like Sushi Go, I don't think I would call that a party game.
No.
But, I had Phil Walker Harding on Monday, and we played it. It's such a brilliant game. Like, I talked for like a long time, so hopefully people understand that I'm absolutely in love with that game. And similarly, when I talk about what defines a game, even that's not to say that toys or activities are not, really awesome things, but it's just at a certain point we need to say, okay, what are we talking about? Let's carve out our space, especially if you've got a podcast where you decided these are what the things we're talking about, and it's ultimately, you say, the ultimate question is, would you take it to a party?
And that's how we got to that, was, like, that wasn't, if you listen to way back in time to the first episodes that were very hard physically to listen to, was that we hadn't gotten to that yet. And we hadn't because we were still figuring out what we meant, because in the beginning it was very simple. We picked the easy stuff. You take apples to apples and wits and wagers, and the ones that are very clearly right down the middle, every time going to be a party game. And once you get to episode like 30, you end up having to climb outside and say, and start changing your definitions and start saying, like, maybe I care less. And it was a lot of fight between us and the show, because I would say, well, I found this great game, I'm going to bring it in. And then someone would say, it's not a party game, Bruce. I don't care how much you want to play that game. It doesn't count. And then that sort of became the discussion for a bunch of episodes. And then eventually we calmed down, and we don't even really care about whether it's a game under a lot of definitions. We'll take a lot of toys and activities as long as they're theoretically sold in the game aisle. That's sort of the other thing we look at, is that if here in the US, if it's going to be sold...
You've even done stuff that's digital. You've done the Jackbox Party Pack.
Yes, because I very much feel like that is a party game. I think Jackbox Party Pack fits what a board game party game wants to be. The only thing they did was that back in the day, if we were talking about like a Milton Bradley game of the 90s, they would have built some kind of squawk box that would have been in the middle of the board, and Jackbox said, well, we're past the squawk box, we're just going to make it so you can play it on your TV. So we think there's a lot of brilliant games that still very much have the heart and soul of a board game, because the first time we did Jackbox, we had to talk about a lot. Do we think this sits in the boundaries? Are we okay with it? And what mostly we noticed was that if we said to somebody, we're having a game night, we'll bring some games, and they'd say, sure, bring wits and wagers and monikers and come with them, they would be playing the Jackbox Party Pack. So it became something where we said, well, we've got to come to where people are. So we've got to accept that we have to look at this because the world is looking at that.
I mean, there's nothing in your podcast's name that mentions non-digital. It's not the non-digital Party Gamecast, the podcast featuring...
We feel lucky that we didn't define that. We put ourselves in a lot of boxes when we started. As little as we didn't realize it. But as time went on, we certainly figured it out. But that was one that we didn't. And specifically, the more we went on, the more we were certainly, especially as we went into lockdowns, we were super glad. Although that was sort of the last sort of bit of us being able to hold together, was trying to play something that would be considered a party game over a digital format. It's tough to do because of that raucousness. It's very tough anytime you're in like Zoom or Teams or whatever your of choice is, to kind of keep that high energy thing going.
And this, what you just said, high energy. I mean, I was looking at the bottom of the screen where it says joy. And the question is, like, what sparks joy? Like, I mean, party games are about sparking that high energy, getting things going. And I think
Yep.
that there's, something marvelous about pondering deeply. I love photosynthesis. I've talked about it so many times on this show, and people know I adore that. I love Go, but these are not games that get me invigorated, excited, and really relishing that moment. It's more of a, okay, quiet contemplation, which is its own good thing.
Yep.
But what do you think makes a good party game? I mean, one thing you've not mentioned is the drop in and drop out ability. And to toot my own horn, like Wibble, which is a word. Have you played Wibble?
I feel like at some point I have, but I'm not gonna lie to
So,
you to
like,
your
you've
face
got
and act
the
like I 100% remember it.
You've got the two cards in the middle of the deck. Each card
Yep.
has two letters on it, and you need to shout a word that contains at least one letter from each card.
Okay.
And then as the time goes on, you grab more and more cards, and then it sort of resets once someone gets their third card.
Yep.
And so you keep going through. The person who got 3 cards and won the round gets a bonus point, but they also get a bonus obligation for the entire rest of the game. So they have to use more and more things. As the game goes on, it gets harder for the people doing well. And if you join in late, it's like a million other games, to be fair. Like, you can join in late if you don't care about points. You might lose out on having all those points. Similarly, if you jump out early, you're not going to mess up the game for other people. And this is totally contradictory to, Twister. Well, to be fair, I was going to say, if you can't really join in late to that. Like Yogi, you can't join in late. I mean, I've seen people try and be like, okay, you catch up. But part of that game, to be honest, is the muscle fatigue. I mean, part of that is like, if you do this and you're doing it for 5 seconds, it's probably fairly simple. But if you've got to do that and like draw your next 5 cards like that, it's a lot harder. And so how important is that drop in, drop out ability?
I think, to define it as a party game, completely unimportant. I believe you're allowed to have a party
define
game.
it as a good party game.
To me, the drop in and drop out in no way, shape, or form defines a good or bad party game. It is just another thing you can think about. The same way some good party games have dexterity and some don't, and some good party games are words and some aren't. Some you can drop in and out, and some you can't. I do think that you are allowed to have what we define as a party game that requires you to care. This has been a thing I fought for. I act like I'm at a revolution. But a thing I've talked about many times is that I don't think points are important unless you tell me they are. And if you tell me they are, then you need to care too. I mean that, and I'm talking directly to the game designer, right? So if the game is Telestrations, I can look at it and say, these points mean nothing. We don't care about these, and that's fine. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. You don't have to care about them. You can look at a game. I'm seeing it over in the corner here. Concept. Concept literally says in the rules, yeah, we made a scoring system so you could call it a game, but we don't really think you should use the score. Beautiful. Once you say that, we're no longer bound by the score. What I hate is when a game says, like, yeah, I guess you get some points, but whoever gets to 10 wins. I don't like that, where like the how you score points is loosey-goosey. How you hand them out is like, well, every time you think someone does something good, give them a point. What does that mean? You didn't define the terms. I could choose to hand everyone points, or if I'm real competitive, I could give no one points. Why are you putting this on me? I think that's a big problem, and I think that's something a lot of party games sort of have an issue with, is people that designing a party game is very difficult because it requires you to design a game with like 4 rules. And even if gamers don't respect party games, most game designers do, because they know that designing a cohesive game in like 4 to 6 rules is borderline impossible. Every single party game that does it, where I can just say, like, okay, look at this card. This says something, and it says, like, mule. And I say, okay, Three of us are going to act this out, but we can't talk to each other. That person over there is allowed to take as many guesses as they want and go. Being able to make that a cohesive idea that creates an entertaining interaction is super difficult. And everybody looks at it and goes, "Stupid game. Why would I even worry about that? I mean, it's not terraforming Mars. It's not Ark Nova." And you're like, well, yeah, anybody can make a game that takes 90 rules. It's not to say, I know you're obligated to say, well, not anybody can make Ark Nova, Bruce. It's a brilliant game. Yeah, I get it. But like when you have 90 rules to work with, it becomes, you do go for higher aspirations because you have
sure,
more
it's like a lot of people doing more work and you can layer more and more stuff on, and I do agree with it. Like, given more time, you will probably, I think that there's something weird going on with digital playtesting, right? Because digital playtesting is brilliant for games that are all about the balance and the strategy and what choices do you make. But even in a game which is about trading and discussion, like Seize the Power, which sadly IATB is no longer a company and we're looking for a new, that's not a party game, but Seize the Power is a very serious game all about bigotry and discrimination, and you're kind of talking to each other. Okay, will you be willing to do this if I give you 2 money, or will you be doing, and then you're talking to multiple people at once, and even that communication, even if you use the microphone, it kind of falls down because only one person is able to hold the air at once. It's not like you can turn your head to listen to other people, let alone when you've got a speed game or a game that's all about, oh, what's everyone else thinking? Now I'm going to slam my card down and hope that I psych them out. Or a game where you're trying to, do poses. There's no way I could ever have tested Yogi in like the 20, well, maybe I could have, online. I was going to say there was no way I could have tested it during the pandemic, but then if I had a small group coming together, that's how I would have done it. And that's how I continue to do stuff for the LDEC, by having a very small group of maybe 4 friends that were coming over regularly, and hey, let's see what we enjoy. Let's see what actually sparks joy, because that's the most important thing of being able to spark joy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And in any game that becomes super important. I think, pardon me once again. I think in larger, bigger games, you can lose the joy for a long time and still be fine. And I say that with no sarcasm, there are a great number of crunchy games that I find myself playing and liking. But you can, the atom of fun can be put much further apart in games where it's a lot of calculation and crunching. Something where all of the atoms of fun are tightly packed is something like Happy Salmon. That you could never have tested that over Zoom. It just wouldn't have happened. I would argue if you're responsible, you might not even still be able to play it yet in most groups unless you know where everybody's been. But I think, to me, that's the difference. And I think there's still, in many games, but especially in party games, there's still like the magic. You start to go back to that stuff. It happens a lot in music. People talk about it. When Quincy Jones talks about Thriller, he often says, "I don't know what happened, but God was in the room." Now, for those of you that have no belief in God, I'm with you, but I understand what he's saying, which is there's some spirit, there's something in the room that's intangible that I don't get and I don't understand, but is there.
So this is a Michael Jackson song, Thriller?
This is the whole Michael Jackson album, Thriller.
Okay.
Quincy Jones produced the album. And oftentimes when people talk to him about it, and they say, like, well, what happened? How did that work? How did these certain things? Because it's the beginning, it's a lot of the building blocks of the same stuff that all of the folks that have eventually come out of, like, Sweden and all this big Swedish folks, your Max Martins and stuff, kind of used a lot of the same tricks. And they're like, well, how come when you do it to Britney Spears, sometimes it sounds very robotic, but when you did it to Michael Jackson, it didn't? And that was sort of his explanation, was God was in the room. Once again, I think that's a questionable way to get there, but I understand the language, which is sometimes when you see the thing, you can't explain it, but it's there.
Sometimes you've got to go by intuition. And I know
Yep.
I've read so much by Mark Rosewater, who I keep referencing, who says, oh, this was a thing that I felt was problematic, but I didn't push it because I couldn't explain why. And
Yep.
then after the fact, it was a problem, and then I worked out why. But I need to learn to trust my gut sometimes.
Hmm.
And we know more than we can necessarily explain. I mean, I think that there's definitely an intuition. But I
Absolutely.
would like to move on
Okay.
slightly and talk about recent highlights, living life and seeing the sights, recent highlights, playing games and other delights. Recent highlights. I want to talk about the last 3 games which I played yesterday. So, firstly, I want to talk about Connect 4 Spin. Have you seen this?
Yes, I have. I have not played it, but I have seen it. I've been curious about it.
It is so good. I mean, Connect 4, for those who don't know, you drop things, it goes all the way to the bottom, and then you're trying to make 4 in a row. Here, you put them anywhere in this grid. And so it's almost like a 2-dimensional board. But here's the twist. So here, red's maybe just gone here.
Hmm.
You can't tell by my fingers pointing here.
Yeah.
And then you spin the piece. So it's going to make this nice noise. And then you've got the joy of that wheel. Oh, and if red had finished like that, then obviously red would have had the 4 in a row.
Yep.
But it's got this thing where you can think a little bit about, okay, there's a lot more weight on this side compared to this side. But sometimes you get the really lucky shots where, oh, yes, it managed to come out the way I wanted. And now I'm going to steal the win, even though probability just was not on my side. And the magnets are brilliant. It is all about the product design. There's these metal bits at the bottom.
Okay.
There's magnets deep in the thing, and they're very
Okay.
strong magnets. So they're strong enough to, if I were to just lay it flat, the red's going to go down because there's enough, what's the smoothness, I guess.
Yeah.
But as it spins round, the magnets are sometimes tight enough to catch it on the way and be like, haha, you thought that was going to happen? To heck with you.
Nice. That is
So,
fantastic.
and so would you say that as a 2-player game, I mean, it seems too cerebral to be a party game, but this kind of spectacle, it does capture a bit of that joy. Do you get what I mean?
Absolutely. And this would be the kind of thing where on the show we would try to debate, whether the ball's in or not. It
Hmm.
can this be? Does the ting 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 ting, does that make it a party game? And I think it starts to get it much closer. I do agree with you. It's a little cerebral for a party game, but quite frankly, if you're an incredibly cerebral person and that's the kind of party you have, I get it. I would say that certainly borders much closer to a party game than many of the abstracts that are out there. That
I
is
mean,
one of the most joyous abstracts I've ever seen.
so beer pong, I've never actually played it in person, but I've
Okay.
seen it on the American media. But that's a 2-player game, right? And
Uh,
so,
it can be. It can be as few as 2 or as many as every person you know.
oh yes, because you take turns to bounce the ball.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
yeah, I forgot that bit about it. So yeah, that's different. I was going to say, yeah, that's a party game,
But
but
it's definitely a 2-player party game because and I'll tell you this, being especially of the two of us, the subject matter expert of Americans, you don't play it anywhere that's not a party or where they didn't contrive a way to win money playing it. It's not a game you just you pull out because you need a strong bit of intellectual stimulation. You are only doing that at a party, or once again because America, where we create a professional league where people play it, and then people play it for cash. But
well, wait,
uh,
there is a professional beer pong
there's
league.
a professional. So that's the thing. So in the way that we have twisted capitalism, there's nothing you can do where you can't do it for cash. So this sort of thing has been created. There's bar nights, the same way like you may have pub quizzes. People will have beer pong nights for money where you come in and pay cash to play. But that's just sort of anytime as an American, you're obligated to say when someone's like, I found this really fun thing. You're like, well, you can play it for money, right? That's just one of those things that I have to do.
Sad. It feels sad. I mean, it feels like not everything has to be monetized. Like once you start bringing in extrinsic rewards, it's it's scientifically proven that it loses part of the joy. And let's
Oh,
keep it about the intrinsic joy of the activity. Come on,
oh, no, no,
people.
no. We're about the high skill of throwing a ping pong ball into a solo cup. And the only way to find the best ping pong ball thrower is to put the maximum amount of cash out. We're real quick to take everything and make it a very intense sport. That's what we want to do. And every once in a while it changes lives and makes things better for people. So I'm occasionally happy to see it. One for us is cornhole, where cornhole has, I don't know, is that even a thing? Is that a concept you've even heard of?
I've heard of it, but I wouldn't know it if it wasn't for the internet. Tell me about cornhole.
So cornhole is, there are two boards that are incredible distances apart. It's a yard game, similar, I guess, in the same family with like a bocce ball. Or Black Sheep saying it's a beanbag thing. You have a beanbag, you throw it at a board where it is a long board that's about 6 feet long, and there's a hole cut in it. And essentially, you're trying to throw the beanbag to either go completely through the hole or to hit the board and slide up the board and go in the hole.
Hmm.
Uh, that is the core of the game. Each team throws 5 or 6 bags. I don't remember how many. Most points wins, and then you walk down the other end and do it. Or if you're playing doubles, person on the other end throws the beanbags back. There is a professional league. And I love stupid sports. So I will every once in a while watch it for a couple of minutes. And you'll hear these amazing stories where it's like Rhonda Donaldson had no idea she was a professional caliber cornhole player until one day it was in her town. And now she's flown out to Des Moines, Iowa. She'd never been on an airplane before. And she just learned what it's like to go on an airplane thanks to her professional cornhole
Wow.
winnings, because she doesn't want to be tired driving from one city to the next. Now, I think, depending on how you want to see this is either a very sad story, very happy story. I choose to see it as a very joyous story where this person got to experience brand new life experiences because we've taken one of the dumbest yard games and moved it to a professional level. That is how I choose to see it. But that is the American way. Whatever you have, we're going to make a professional league out of it just as soon as we possibly can.
That is just ridiculous. I love it. Um, I was going to share a couple of other things. So
Okay.
one thing that it's my own game, but thanks to Eric for the photos, Kitty Cataclysm. So this is a
Nice.
game for 2 to 5 players. You play a card, you do what it says. So you don't even draw a card unless the card tells you to, which I am actually quite proud of, because by removing the draw step, then you can have slightly more powerful cards, if you know what I mean, because,
Mm-hmm.
hey, the draw step isn't necessarily going to be there, so you can have more variance in what you do. Sometimes you can be like, oh, I just need that one card, but maybe my opponent's going to donate me something that they need. So maybe someone else maybe I'll get to steal something, and that's brilliant. Or maybe they'll allow me to draw something on their turn. And at the end of the game, everything that you've got in your personal kitty and everything that you're holding in your paws is added together, the monetary value on the top, and that determines the winner. And it's fairly simple. And yeah, we played it a couple of times. It's one of those games that's so quick. And again, I'm tooting my own horn, but because games can be anywhere, and on Board Game Geek, I said this could be anywhere from 5 to 15 minutes. And
Okay.
apparently I misspoke because some people are saying 50 minutes. I wouldn't want to play this game for 50 minutes. And no, I did not say 5-0. And so in future, I'll maybe say basically it's 5 to 10 minutes. And that because the longest ever game that I've seen, which was by a bunch of people who are really, really slow at games, like they're the slowest players ever.
Yep.
The slowest game ever in history of watching hundreds of games was 17 minutes. But I would say a good 90% of games are less than 12. So I think I can get to, and sometimes you even get like a 30 seconds game where it's like, oh my gosh, I've just got like the ridiculous best hand and I can
Mm-hmm.
win straight away. And then you play it. I mean, again, like, is this a party game?
So for me, this fits in the exact same place as Flux,
Mm-mm.
where I'm not. I think it depends. The problem with Flux is, and I don't know if this shares similar DNA enough that it's the same problem. which is Flux is everything from a party game to a problem, and you don't know which it is until you play. Because every game can be different. Flux can very much be a party game, especially once again, if you want to have a subdued party. If it's the kind of thing where really what you want to do is kind of make references to things that you like, the branded Fluxes are especially good at that. If you just want to like say Star Trek words and you kind of want a game loosely connected around it, Star Trek Flux is great at that. And if it's a 5-minute game, you just played a party game. If somehow you're playing a 30-minute game of Flux, you have a problem. And you don't know which it's going to be until you deal the cards and start playing.
Yeah, this game was heavily back in its early days, so I really like the idea of Flux, but I've got to admit that I played games of Flux where I've said to people before we started, okay, after 40 minutes, I do have to leave, and I want to put a hard cap on it, but if you're okay to do that, then I'm happy to play. And I played, I think it was Star Flux, and then we went through the deck, and then we shuffled up, and then we played a couple of more cards, and I said, okay, I have to go at this point. And then the other 3 people, 2 of them said, yeah, that's fine. We've seen all the cards and we had fun. So thank you for playing with us. And the 4th person said, yeah, sure, I don't mind. And but I know some people are okay with just saying, we've had enough fun, let's stop the game. But I do much prefer it personally. And this might be my own completionist issues, but I like the game to say, hey, people, we are done. And now you can move on to other things or play again if you want. And that's why this game, with the cards, you will be drawing and playing. And once the deck runs out, which will happen far sooner than you think, that will be the end of the game, no matter what. And there's no way to get more cards back into the deck. And hello, Runa, I hope that you're having a great Sunday as well. Have a fantastic Sunday. But yeah, so yeah, I don't want to. Ultimately, you'd have to play it, I guess, to determine whether you think it's a party game.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it's going to be in that space where it's closer to a party game than not. You know, just because time, if nothing else. It's very hard to design a game that only plays in 5 minutes that doesn't end up somewhere near party game territory. You know, even a game that's as barely a game as like Win, Lose, or Banana. I don't know that I think it's a party game. I think because of the intense interaction that it might be a little much. But I personally, and this is, I think we all have blind spots.
For folk who don't know Win, Lose, Banana, you've got 3 cards. And then someone grabs Banana, someone grabs Lose, and someone grabs Win. And you don't know what you've got. But then the winner reveals their card, and they win if they can determine who's the banana. And then the whole game is the banana saying, come on, pick me, I'm honestly the banana. And then the loser saying, hey, come on, pick me, I'm the banana. And if the winner picks the banana, then the winner and banana win. But if the winner picks Lose, then Lose actually wins and winner and banana lose. And the whole game is just 2 people saying, come on, pick me, come on, pick me. And it's ridiculous. There's no information to be had. It's just down to their face. Why do you think that's too intense? Is it because people feel bad that they've not been picked?
I think because anytime you have like an element of cheating and lying, and once again, as I was going to say, this is my personal blind spot. I hate cheaty lie games. So I'm always going to grade them tougher than I would any other type of game. So what you were hitting is my personal bias, and I know exactly where it sits. I would say I find to be more of a game, more of a party game, and I think maybe more lighthearted. If you look at Cats Does Countdown, they have several times done, is there a carrot in my box? I think that is more of a party game by taking out the other person. Because I think when you have 2 people going, they're lying. No, they're lying. No, they're lying. No, I'm telling the truth. No, I'm telling the truth, and they are lying. And that interaction I just had is not only viable, it's most of the interactions. I think you get to a point where you start to leave fun and almost approach an argument if you're really trying to win. And that's a case where the victory condition wants that. And to me, it's just, it's all a situation that kind of makes me, and not a lot of situations make me kind of fold in on myself, but that is one of them for me.
I can understand that. I mean, yeah, there is something about lie cheaty games where you are doing this one thing which is completely not okay generally to do with your friends. And sure, it's okay to, I mean, we've kind of accepted that, yeah, in real life, we are going to support each other. We are going to cooperate. But within the context of games, we are going to be competitive, and maybe I'm even going to steal your cards, and there's a little ha 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 ha. But even that does feel less intense, you're right, than me saying, you are a liar.
Yep, and you are telling the truth. And once again, also, I'm a big proponent for using play to stretch those muscles. Like, I'm fine with, we're in the circle where it's acceptable and you can lie and cheat and steal here. I'm okay with that. I have no problem with that at all. It's just, would I call that a party game? No, I have a real problem sometimes with that. And then once again, it's my personal bias, but I'm always going to note it, is that I do find those to be a little hard because I think the interaction's a little hard to swallow for me, for it to always feel lighthearted. Although, once again, I feel Carrot in a Box is a significantly better and more lighthearted game than Win, Lose, or Banana. And all you
I
do is
will
take
have
the
to
first one.
check that out. Carrots in the Box.
Carrot in a Box. Just look at any episode. It's always going to be, I'm trying to think of who all always plays it. It's usually John Richardson and somebody. But check it out. And literally the whole game is this. You and I would be there. There would be a third host that all they do is host it because it's a game show. And they'd say, okay, Bez, take a look in your box. Bruce, does Bez have a carrot in their box? And she's saying, I absolutely have a carrot. Because for me, there are two boxes. And I, Bruce, win if I finish with the carrot. Do you have the carrot, or does the box I can't look at have the carrot? And it's just,
I don't have a carrot.
I don't, yeah. And it's me going, but I think you might. I think you could. Should I take your box? And then you going, absolutely. If you want to win, you should take my box that has a carrot in it. And that's the whole game. And I think it's a better game and more lighthearted.
Because I want your box. So are you going to swap, Bruce? Are you going to take my box?
I'll take your box.
Oh.
And then they reveal whether there's a carrot in the box.
I was lying.
But like there's the interaction. And I think that's a more playful interaction because there isn't a third person involved at all. And I think you and I can have that interaction, and it can be more lighthearted because I can only get it right or get it wrong. That's it. It is that one interaction of, am I lying or am I telling you the truth? But there's no other person yelling at us, that has any stake in anything. And I understand, like, why you would think this game doesn't work. I know even when I've seen, like, Jimmy Carr and people talk about it.
It's exactly the same as Win, Lose, Banana. It's got exactly the same, thing of someone says something and then you look at their face and decide whether they're lying or not. It's just that it's taking out that third party. So rather than base it on two individuals, and then those two individuals start blasting each other potentially, you're basing it on one individual and it's this interaction.
And then Black Sheep asking,
can you play it with 5 people and 2 boxes have carrots in? I mean, I guess you could. But I think then you get into that whole people start blasting each other again, which I think is what Bruce is saying. By having only one person and no one saying this other person is a liar and I'm telling the truth, you kind of miss out on those bad vibes. Am I presenting you correctly?
That is how I personally feel. I don't know that everyone's going to feel the same way, but for me, if the interaction is just you and I, it is either you tricked me or I tricked myself. And if you tricked me, good on you, well played. And if I tricked myself, gosh darn it, I tricked myself. And I feel like
if you got my bluff and you got it right, then well done. And if you made the right call because I was telling the truth, then well done. Maybe I should have lied.
But once you add another person, you add a person that can argue. And furthermore, if you and I, Bez, decide that we're going to play the game, that third person can just be standing there uninvolved. Even if they have a card, and this happens a lot in Win, Lose, or Banana, where if you're the person to choose, you lock in on one person, you decide you're going to make your decision simple. I'm just going to talk to you because I can try to figure out what you're doing. Essentially, I can make it carrot in a box. and just look at you. But there's a third person in the game that's like, but I'm here. I'm here. Look at me, look at me, look at me, because I'm supposed to be an active member of this game. And for me, like I said, those have been my issues with Win, Lose, or Banana. I think on paper, it's an amazing idea, and I'm sure tons of people have a lot of fun playing it, and I do not knock your fun. But for me, I've always felt like Carrot in a Box is a superior version.
I mean, you're not here to tell people, hey, don't play Sushi Go or don't play Terraforming Mars. You're just saying that for you, this is not what you play at a party.
Exactly. Exactly.
And I want to actually talking about recent titles. So I had actually finishing off recent highlights. I'm going to quickly mention Fork. Last night I played this with some amazing people on a stream, and Amanda Panda and Crystal Dax organized this, and definitely not a party game. It's closest to a trick-taking game, although it has a lot of things that make it. Some people would say it's not a trick-taking game. Some people would. You're playing cards sequentially, but then you play them face down, and it's not like one person takes all the cards. It's if you played the only fox, then you take the owl. If you played the owl and it's not been eaten, you can take a rabbit. If you play the rabbit and it's not been eaten, you can grab a kale. But you don't know what other people put down because they're putting it face down. But there is a suit that you have to place, and it's quite cerebral. It's quite like getting into your head, guessing what you're doing, and it's a nice game. I enjoyed it. But Bruce, we're here to talk about you. What have you played recently? What's been the last game that you played, or have you just been recovering from COVID on a bed?
So lately, it's just been recovering from COVID on a bed. But I also did a couple. I did Unpub well before all that. Not where I got sick. Don't worry, everybody. So I saw some really cool things in Unpub. I also did. We have one friend. It's one of the only events I go out to all year. Is we have a friend. We do one event as the Party Gamecast for charity every year, and then in the same space because we rent a space for it. I have a friend of mine that does SteveCon, where it's just a day of playing board games. So I finally played Mega City Oceania. I've owned it since it came out because I was like, it seems like my type of game, and I'd never played it before, and that game is brilliant. Mega City Oceania essentially is, let's take, I cannot hear what you are saying.
Question, how many did you play it with?
Played it with just 2.
Interesting, because I've got that game and I feel it's a lovely idea and it should work, but the whole, okay, you need to stop at certain points and then someone pushes it in and then it's like, okay, take from the bag. Now you need to stop building because I've taken from the bag. Now you need to do your move. And then I take from the bag and pass it on. And that feels quite often like the best move to make. Just take from the bag, pass it on so you can get back to building. And that kind of stop-start nature of the game, it felt a little bit to me, to be honest.
I can 1,000% say that is a viable and reasonable critique of the game. I can also say with 2 people, it didn't feel so bad. Because essentially we got through, like, if both people were just building, we would just sit the bag between us. The bag would have a rotation it makes, and if both of us just wanted to keep building, we would just sit the bag off to the side and keep building. Essentially, we played
that's kind of a house rule, though, because rules as written, one person is meant to have the bag and be drawing from the bag. And yeah, big up Michael Fox. I mean, Michael J. Fox is a great designer, and like I love that I think it was Michael Fox and Jordan Draper worked together on that. And, you know, with that and Holding On, Michael's done some amazing stuff, and Blaze Ball's just come out.
I'm waiting for mine because that's the thing I always loved. I wish that it was still around in its purest form, Blaze Ball, because I just thought it was such a fun and ridiculous idea for a thing for people to follow, which I love to see. I'm quasi a baseball person. I'm probably much more of a T20 cricket person than I am a baseball person, but it's easier for me to watch baseball and get baseball things. So I loved Baseball as the idea of baseball, but everything's absurd. Because absurdist anything is better than normal anything.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah. So I just thought that was so fantastic when it was coming out, because I remember it was one of the things that Michael and I could bond on. Where I was like, have you seen Baseball? He's like, oh my God, what are you talking about?
But it sounds, I mean, for me, Holding On, sorry, not Holding On, Mega City Oceania, it's actually, with rules as written, it's best with the higher player counts, because if you say someone has to have the bag and then you're passing it round, but it sounds like with your the other person that you were playing with, you made some small adjustments that made it a really nice fit for you.
Yeah, I did not realize, because I mean it's been so long since anyone played it, so we didn't really like. It's not like you can even get a video to watch to, you know, easily off the shelf to how to play the game anymore. So we kind of looked at that and we said like, hey, especially because what you could easily do with two people is I take three, 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 I
Exactly,
take
and
three, I
that's
take
my
three, I
issue
take
with
three,
it.
and then you're holding 15, which is your max. Then what? You know, is that push and pull any fun? And we just immediately decided, I suppose, that it wasn't, to the point to where it didn't even make sense to us that that would be how the game was played. We figured essentially the bag worked as a marker of this bag sits next to the person whose actual turn it is. If that person wants to push into the island, they've got to have that bag next to them to be allowed to do it. You know, that you couldn't take an action unless you had the bag, but that if everyone didn't pick the bag up and everyone just sat building things, that was fine. The bag sits where the bag sits. And if you're like, gosh darn it, I need more steel, you could pick the bag up if it's your turn, grab it and keep pushing. And we kind of just use that as a marker. And that is the same way we had the people next to us who borrowed it after we got done playing it. They played the same way. And they said the same thing. They were like, as long as you use the bag to mark where a turn would be, you're good. But if somebody takes that bag and like throws it in the middle and you don't know where the turns are, it gets out of control.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like I mean, it feels like something where maybe I should do a deep dive into it, invite Michael on to kind of talk about it after episode, like for a quick talk, but let's get back a little bit to party games. There's two things that you've mentioned that I want to ask about.
Yep.
Firstly, you mentioned everyone being involved. I know that's not a requirement for a party game, but does all else being equal, is that always making for a better party game?
Yes, I think so. I think that reverse charades is better than charades because more people are charading, and the person who's yelling guesses matters a lot.
And like simultaneous action, real-time games just have this advantage that turn-based games don't.
Yes, the only other time I think that is perfectly acceptable and very much a pro party game thing is if one person's turn is like on and the other entire team or people can be off, right? So if it's your team works out your thing, we're gonna go get a drink. I don't think that's bad either. That there's some sort of a like real hard wall of a stop where you do your thing, we're gonna go grab a drink and we'll be back, and then we kind of get into the next part of the game.
I'm trying to remember Cranium. I mean, it takes like a good while for a team. It might be like a minute, and then a minute's long enough that you can maybe go into the kitchen and say, hey, okay, it's your turn. I'm just going to grab more crisps.
Or even, let's look at Wits and Wagers, right? So you have that long period where people are writing down answers to questions, and especially if you're playing like the 21 player variant, where teams of 3 are deciding things, I can say, hey, we have our answer. There it is. We're going to go grab a soda. We'll be right back. And it doesn't break the game and it doesn't hurt the flow and it's not disrespectful because everybody else is still saying, okay, well, I mean, I've seen it in pictures, but I don't know how tall it is. You know, and you can do that. I don't mind games with that kind of clear delineation between this is the guessing part of the game. This is the wits. Once all the boards are down, we get to the wagers. You know, that there's that clear drawing line there.
Other question. Do you think that a party game should be, I hate this phrase, but like good vibes only? Because he talks about the arguments being like bringing people down. And do you think that it's okay to talk about potentially deep topics and problematic topics in a party game?
So I would say for my party game, no. At that point, you've created a social interaction that might be lighthearted to get through harder topics. But I think that calling it a party game is going to be at least slightly disingenuous. It's just my personal belief. I'm not to say that somebody couldn't show me a game where I go, gosh darn it, you are right about that.
Yeah, like all of these things we exist to be subverted and for us to be surprised with.
Absolutely. I played one, and this is absolutely the right forum for me to talk about this game. I played it at Unpub, and it was an art house project of a game, nary a game if it even were. But I'm trying to remember the cute pun name it had. But essentially, in the game, you were dinosaurs seconds before the blast, before the Ice Age came. And you have decided that you are going to deal with knowing that's coming by playing human board games. And all you have to do is cope. So there's all these cards, and the person that was running it, like, what was so great was watching them field questions, because I'm at Unpubs. It's people designing games and people that are minded for that. You don't show up to this sort of event if you are not making a game, and the few psychopaths that are not making games are the kind of people that want to test half-baked games. So they're saying things like, well, how do I win? And this person says, well, if there were a win condition, it would be coping. And you're like, what? If there were a win condition, it would be coping. The game plays for 5 minutes or when someone asks how much time's left. And then you look at your card and like you have a card that's a coping card. And my coping card was try to win the most human games you can while time is still available.
Huh.
And then you flip a card over and it says like tic-tac-toe, play tic-tac-toe. So it's this weird thing where all of the components shout party game, party game, party game, party game. But at the end, it's a nihilistic nightmare of trying to figure out your coping mechanisms of accepting the end of your own life. And I think it's one of those things where you can see it as a party game until you understand what it's doing. So I don't call it a party game, but it was a brilliant sort of exploration of what games are and how we pass our time. And it was done in 5 minutes, which just blew my mind. And even talking to the person, I said, like, this is not a product, right? And they were like, yeah, so I didn't make it to be a product. And
I would pay money for that.
No, and then that's what they said. They were like, and then people started saying they would pay money. So I felt like I should refine it into something that's more than just me drawing shit on cards. And I was like, okay, you know what? I'm done. I totally get where this is coming from. They were like, yeah, my hope is to put it on Game Crafter. And if people want to get on Game Crafter and get it, good on them.
You know what? If you remember what that is, and if it goes on Game Crafter, send me a link and I will like tweet it and tell everyone else about it.
I will find it again. I know it is a play on words for raptor and rapture. And I just don't remember what it is, but I'll figure it out and get it to you because it was such a game that I imagine would tickle you. The only problem is I think once you know what it is, you've more or less ruined it because you see what's happening. And I figured it out pretty early, but just watching the other players kind of still play a game. And I'm like,
it kind of reminds me of Train, but slightly less harsh.
No, very much so. Very much so. It was exactly what I compared it to. I was like, oh, this is like the Tinker Toy version of Train. And the person was like, well, I need to look that up. And I was like, oh, don't get deep into it. But yeah. I said, it definitely gives me the same, like, once it slaps you in the face.
I don't get deep into it. I've gotten deep into Train. And
I think once you know what it's teaching you, I don't know that I need the efficiency puzzle past once I've learned what it has to teach me. And it's the same thing for this game. It's a very silly game that's borderline pointless until you suddenly realize what the point is. And I think it's brilliant.
Black Sheep mentions Cards Against Humanity. And how do you feel about stuff that's like even beyond this, like Crabs Adjust Humidity, if you know that version of the game?
I was one of the first people to talk about that version of the game.
You might have been the person who told me about it. I'm sorry I can't remember everything you said.
That's by all means. That wasn't a slight. That was just simply a statement of being.
No, but how do you feel about these deliberately offensive adult things? And I also want to... we could talk about games that are deliberately... Actually, let's talk about that first, because I do also then want to talk about Kama Sutra and sex games.
Okay. So then we'll start with Cards Against Humanity, which I have a very complicated relationship with, because when it first came out, I kickstarted it. I was one of the first people into it, and over the pandemic, over the lockdown, I sold it because I wanted it out of my life. And I'll tell you, it's going to border completely down on this, For me, this was exactly the interaction where you decide whether you're okay with it or not. If you are playing it in a circle of friends where we all know why we're laughing, right? So we all say like, oh, the patriarchy, she probably ought to she ought to smile a little more. And we all know that we're laughing because we think that's ridiculous and that we're laughing at the absurdity of it. We're good. When you play it with people where everyone's laughing and you think some people are laughing because they're thinking, oh, that's so true, she ought to put a smile on her face, that's where the game dies. The moment for me, it was the moment I played it with strangers and we weren't laughing at the absurdity of racism or anti-Semitism or transphobia or whatever the bad thing is it is. We weren't laughing at how ridiculous that was. And someone was laughing because they were like, oh, these fucking people. That was when I it was like ice water had poured over me the first time I saw it happen, where I was like, oh God, no, put it away. I can't do this anymore. This person's not laughing for the same reason I am. To me, that is the issue. I don't play it anymore because I want games to be able to be played with whoever I come across. And if I can't play with everybody I come across, I don't really want to have it in my collection anymore. I don't knock you out there. If you want to play it and those racist, sexist, anti-Semitic interactions are what you want to have, I guess I'm not going to tell you no if you feel like the folks in your group are laughing for the right reason. I think it's too easy to not laugh for the right reason for me to want to keep it around. And I think too many of those, like, isn't it so shocking? Too many of those games are just going to teach you things about your friends that you should be slowly trying to get out of them anyway. You know, their habits and things that you should be telling them are wrong whenever they come up. And I don't necessarily need a party game for me to be a place where I have to teach someone the way society works. Like, I don't want to have to discuss white privilege in the middle of a party game. I think it starts to approach that thing you're talking about, where once you get too deep and things get too serious, is it still a party game? And for me, it starts to leave that boundary.
I mean, one thing that comes to my mind is two things. Firstly, Moral Dilemma. I don't know if you know this game. And secondly, the voting game. And hello, Yoda. I hope that you're generally well and all is good in the... What is Dutch? I need to click the Dutch. So you're Hollander, right? Yeah, it's Nederlander. That's the one. Netherlands. I hope that everything's good in the Netherlands. But anyway, so Moral Dilemma is kind of... you get a question and people answer it, and then you kind of vote and decide, okay, would we do this or would we not? And you then have a discussion. So it's kind of more of a, I guess, conversation generation game. And then the voting game is something where it says, hey, which person do you think would be the most likely to dance on top of the table? And then you vote for that person. Or sometimes it's actually things that can be a little bit dark. Like, who do you think would be the most likely to murder one of these people? And then you need to vote for that. So, and those cards are clearly marked, so you can put them in or not, which is always good. But these things feel like more, okay, if I want to get to know people, I really want to get to know them. And so let's not just chuck things into the middle and then hide behind the anonymity. Let's actually talk about this stuff or vote for individuals, and then maybe have, with the voting game, if you just play it, vote, move on, it kind of falls apart. But if you play it, vote, let's talk about why we did that. Okay, vote, and that, then it's a really nice game.
I can totally see that. And I agree. Another thing I hate about the Cards Against Humanity style games is a person's ability to be racist or whatever your ist or ism is, and just say like, well, the cards did it. I'm not racist. The cards are racist. And the problem is they're not wrong. The cards are racist. You know, like, it's very hard to say, well, you put them together. But like, it might have been the joke they saw. It might have been and I think all of that just makes for a very muddy interaction that I do not enjoy having anymore. But I understand if you do and you're out there and your group is still fine with it, great. For me, I can't do it anymore. It's not a thing that makes me happy. It doesn't bring any joy to me for me anymore.
The last thing that I wanted to ask you about is games that are meant to be played, within certain adult settings. I mean,
Mhm.
do you know Body Party by Eric Martin of Board Game Geek?
No.
So Body Party is, I think it says in the rules, choose a partner who you are comfortable touching and want to physically get closer to.
Okay.
And then you've got cards that you need to hold between this body part and that body part. So, for
Okay.
example, it might be hand on cheek, but then the cards between you. So,
Okay.
yeah, you are touching because obviously your hand's going to be going past, and
Yeah.
you have to be comfortable with extreme touching. This is almost a game that says, you know what? Twister is for people who want to be touching each other, but maybe don't want to be open about it. Let's
Hmm.
just be open about it. Let's just touch each other.
Yeah.
And I've only played that with I would not play that with strangers. Let's put it that way. This is
Yeah.
not a convention game. And then we go even deeper into Kama Sutra by, I think it was Bruno Fedduti, where if you
Yep.
know this one, this is
I
you
do.
bursting balloons in between bodies. And then you've got Come Together by Matt Fantastic, which is meant for two partners to work out, hey, what are your kinks? What are
Okay.
my kinks? And let's explore, when we match, then we should go off and do that together. And then you've got a bunch of games from Ann Summers, which, to be honest, most of those are really badly designed. But how do you feel about these games, which are for very specific consenting adults?
I'm fine with them. I think they're fun. I do think the thing is you need to understand that especially games where touching's involved. And I saw this with Happy Salmon because Happy Salmon is as light in the water of touching as you possibly can be, but it is part of the magic of Happy Salmon is that you're physically touching another person. But I will tell you, having been one of there are things I've done demoing that game and sales numbers and things I've hit that don't make sense if I say them to you. I sold 500 copies in one demo of that game because it's so brilliant. But I will say that I learned over time, having done it all over the world, having shown that game, and I can say that because I once did in Essen, that you could see the look on someone's face when it was too much for them. And I think that knowing on any games that involve touching very much specifically, know if you're comfortable, make sure consent is super duper important. And especially with a game like Happy Salmon, you got to get consent quickly because we're about to play the game. But it's super important to make sure that you have it. That I think is more important than anything else with it. If two people want to have fun, and I would say even in the cheap, stupid sex games where it's like you roll dice and it's like lick, nipple. If that's what you want to play and you need rules in your sexual interactions, the same way if you need rules in your conversations, go get them, man. I think it's great. Have fun with it. I don't know. I wouldn't call it a party game because I can't spring it on anybody.
Mm.
So that's where I sit on that as far as in the party game section.
So you feel
If
a
you're asking
party
me
game
like,
should be something where you can play it with strangers and know not that much about them.
for me, I do believe that a good party game you should be able to play with either complete strangers or people you know. I believe there are games like you were talking about, the conversation games, where their goal is not to be a good party game. Their goal is to promote conversation. And that's a great thing, but still, I think it starts to suffer as a party game. This, I
Mhm.
think, is sort of another road down that alley because it is what I want to know is how much do I want to touch this person? And I'd like to learn that in a place where we have a couple of rules involved. And I think that's great, but I don't think it's a party game make. I think it is clearly more a party game than Ark Nova, but I think that because you very clearly cannot introduce it to just anybody, I find a hard time calling it a party game and feeling good about myself doing it because you can't spread there's never been a time I haven't been willing to spring wits and wagers on people because the worst you get from wits and wagers is Bruce, I grew up in the UK. Your units don't make sense and I don't know anything about your sports teams. And you go, you know what? Fair play to you. But that's like the worst interaction you can possibly have is one of international measurement units because we're dumb here in the US. It's just a thing. But like, I
There is
get
a
that.
lot of
Whereas,
other US-centric stuff. I mean, I bought the expansion pack for the party game questions, and then I looked at them all and I was like, yeah, but this was when I was playing it during COVID, because I made some small changes so it could be played on stream,
yeah,
but it's like, yeah, these questions just do not make sense for us. Need to
no,
go with my own questions.
it's one of the things about trivia. I often talk. A lot of people talk to me now about trivia because it's what I do for. Is it wiggle jiggle time? Because I don't want to
It
be left
sure
out.
is.
Oh, oh. Um, is trivia can do a lot of awesome things. People have had a lot of negative interactions with trivia. Trivia does not have to be a negative thing for everyone. But trivia, much like music, is very much about what shared culture do we have. And in the best case, it's how can I share a culture with you? But I would say music's significantly easier than trivia. But essentially, at the same time, being a good DJ for like a party is saying, where can I find common ground with people in this room to show a shared culture? Same with trivia. And that also means that if you are crossing borders, especially very significant borders, as far as like pop culture goes, then it's the bolts start to fly off the ship, as it were.
Yeah, it's definitely challenging. I mean, look, this has been such an amazing conversation. I feel like we could talk probably for days about party games and
Oh,
just
quite
like,
possibly.
examining stuff and going through stuff and trying new stuff and maybe designing something together. If you are ever in London, you know what? I retract that. If you are
Yeah.
in London before I leave, then you are welcome to
Seems,
stay on a
I
couch.
don't even know if they'll let me on a plane early enough to get to London in the proper time frame.
But if you're in Thailand or if we're, in the same city together at some
Yep,
point, it would be lovely to hang out. And if I
absolutely.
do have a place for you to stay, you can absolutely. But I would like to start wrapping up, but there are quite a few questions we didn't get to, but let's do them in a rapid fire manner if that's
Okay.
okay. Okay, brilliant think, brilliant think. What's a little thing which is brilliant? Bruce, what's brilliant?
For me, but banana ball right now is the brilliant thing for me, which is like baseball but watchable. I would also say for those of you that are in Australia or the UK, or just think of it like T20 cricket versus cricket.
Wow, that is amazing. Okay, what sparks joy? What do you love? What
Uh,
get
small furry animals. Like
okay?
you get, like I am a big watch a video of a happy kitty cat or puppy dog. If we're talking about just sparks joy, if I am in a bad place and I need to spark joy, I'm looking for an internet video of happy animals or two animals that seem like they shouldn't be friends but happen to be buddies.
Lovely. What matters to you? What would you like to get done in your life?
Oh my goodness, that is a very hard question. Is a flash question.
It
Um,
is, but
if
what?
I can help people in some way, shape, or form, wherever they are, anyone that listens to whatever ridiculous stuff I do, find a little more joy in the things they think they don't like. The main thing, like for the sports stuff, especially because I know nerds hate sports. As I've constantly tried to explain to nerds, it's not bad if you'll just let go for a second. I can show you small subsections of things that are awesome. Don't look at the whole picture. Look at this small subsection. If I can help people find the small subsections of things where they're really going to like it and really latch on, and especially if it's the kind of thing where it helps you kind of get closer to the larger whole of what everybody else is into. If everyone loves sports, but you love sports logos, you've made a little bit of distance to someone you didn't think you'd make some distance to, and you can try to find a little common ground, and from there, hopefully you'll find more. So if I help people find that little bit of joy in things they think they don't like, I will take that as a life victory.
I love that. What is the last podcast that you listened to?
Oh my goodness, probably Black Diamonds is probably the last one I listened to, that is from very specific, no reason for you to listen to it. It is from the Negro League Baseball Museum, talking
Wow.
about like the lost players and stories of Negro League baseball. Right here on my t-shirt, this is Bob Kendrick, who is the president of the Negro League Baseball Museum, and he is doing everything he can to remind people in the United States, to remind baseball fans that there was an entire segregated league that changed everything that we know about baseball, and that because racism, we've lost a lot of those memories and we've lost that history, and he's working to rebuild it one story at a time. And that's what Black Diamonds is all about, is the stories of Negro League Baseball.
I love that. What gets you up in the morning, would you say?
Usually coffee. Like for me, coffee and a stack of cash is what's gonna get me up in the morning. Beyond that, it is just trying to find those little bits of joy that you find in a day. One of the other things I try to do in my life is the mundane things around me. I try to have the coolest versions I can that make me smile. I have an umbrella that's a rainbow, because if I have an umbrella that's a rainbow, I'm gonna smile if it rains. And I think as many things around you, if your coffee pot can make you smile, if your teacups can make you smile, if your forks can make you smile, that's the way to go. For me, it's all just small little victories throughout the day of things that just make me, like all of the utensils we have are little fish. And sometimes I talk to them, because why not? That's what I'm looking for. Is for me, it's all those little victories. It's it's doing essentially improv with my cat sometimes. It's, those sort of things are what kind of get me up and keep me going.
If I mean, look, my 2 p.m. events are kind of like game shows. Someone pointed this out at Spiel, which I hadn't really thought about before.
Okay.
But for anyone wanting to do a game show, what's some quick tips that you would give to them, whether it's someone else or me doing my 2 p.m. events?
Absolutely. The first thing is, and once again, Bez, I'm never sure when I say this, I'm not sure if this applies to whatever game you're playing, is I think for game shows need what I call very clear balls and strikes. I need to understand why I'm wrong or right. Why did I get points or not? Why am I winning or losing? That is maybe the single most important thing. The squishier the strike zone is, the worse time it is for the person playing. Because if you're playing a game show, that means by nature, it is a performative thing you're doing, right? So what you want to do is, if I'm the person losing, it's already bad enough in a performative environment I'm failing. I shouldn't not know why. And that's one of those, like a lot of your British chat shows have those very furry boundaries on them. And the thing that works is it's all like, those D-level celebrities like Catherine Ryan that are playing them. So the points are really, there's no money on the line. But I think as clear a definition of what success and failure is one of the most important
clarity.
Yes. And it is the second thing is being able to, as the host, get the rules out efficiently and quickly and accurately. Because you're the guide, you're the Sherpa through the whole experience. And if you don't know what's going on, they don't either. And at all times in a good live event, people should feel like they don't know what's going on, but you very much should know exactly what's going to happen. That is a tip for entertaining that took me probably 2 decades to learn, that you should feel like you're completely going to go anywhere, but you should be bolted to rails as much as you can, but no one should see them. It should be like a Disney ride, where it feels like the car's spinning, but very much 8 people know exactly the pressure in the thing that spins the car, so that no one gets hurt and everything comes out fine in the end.
Those are some great tips. And the final thing that I wanted to ask about, appropriately enough, is ending or changing things. I mean, like the Party Gamecast, it's on a hiatus. It will come back. And my show, after episode 1000, I'm going to take a break for a couple of weeks. And then what I'm thinking is maybe I'll do it once a week on the Wednesday. I'm not sure. I'm still figuring that out. But how do you decide when something should be ended or changed? And do you have any tips for people doing that? And again, I'm slightly self-serving, obviously.
I'm a bad person to ask, because I'm not ending things. I'm just stretching them along. But for me, it's when you feel like the thing is not fun and has no purpose, right? Because things cannot have purpose and be a lot of fun, and you should continue to do them. And you can have things you don't enjoy that have high purpose, and maybe you should continue to do those. When it lacks both is when you need to say, like, what does this bring to my life anymore? I'm going to use it in the absolute simplest, lowest value place I can, which is board games, right? So if you're like me, I'm choking on board games. There's so many board games here. And what I've gotten to do, and it's hard for me to do it, is to look at it and say, is anyone going to play the game with me? Is it a piece of art I enjoy having? If it's not those things anymore, I shouldn't have it. Someone else should. And I think like podcasts and everything you're doing, even your personal relationships, if there is a greater need serving the community and that's why you have that relationship, thanks for taking one for the team. If you're enjoying it and you're having fun, you do you. If it is lacking both, that is when you need to start to evaluate what you're doing and why you're doing it.
That's, yeah, a really lovely place. And Dutch Yoda said that the Black Diamonds podcast sounded like something that they'd like to listen to.
It's super awesome. I would say right here, one Mr. Bob Kendrick, one of the greatest storytellers I've seen. I had heard of Black Diamonds and listened to it a little bit, and then this is the last thing I'll say. I know I'm taking over again, and I'll let it go in a second. But there's a video game for Major League Baseball called MLB The Show. It is any standard sports game, hey, like FIFA or whatever, like, hey, we're going to pay attention to sports guys doing sports things. And this year they added a thing that was called storylines. And it was literally going through the beginnings of the Negro Leagues, talking about the players with Bob Kendrick there the whole time. Anytime anything would happen that was negative, because obviously the beginnings of the Negro Leagues in the United States, there was a lot of negativity. If anything negative would happen, that's when Bob would come on and kind of walk you through it. And this is how these sportsmen managed to persevere over the racism at the time and make baseball better for all of us.
Wow.
It was a super, it is a brilliant, I know things now thanks to a goddamn video game that I didn't know, that as like the intrinsic things you pick up. Now, Bez, help me. Being in the UK, so I'm going to try to equate this. Are there just things about football that you pick up just because it's around? You don't want to know it, but you happen to know it because...
Yeah, like the offside rule, I guess. I mean...
Yeah, like the offside rule and who a couple of the players are and a little bit about teams, just because like everyone's talking about it. So you absorb things you don't care about, but you kind of know if someone brings it up.
I mean, saying I don't care about it is broadly true, but like I care about it because it's part of society and I care about society. So I care about it as much as I care about, sewage. Like I think it's important. Well, to be fair, sewage is probably more important. But you know what I mean? Like it's bringing people joy. So it's not my personal joy, but you know what? I'm being too dismissive. You're right. I don't personally care about it that much.
Fair enough, but you find you'll absorb facts because it's in the society, right?
Yeah.
With baseball, we have a lot of those if you're kind of half paying attention. I'm not going to bore you with them. You don't care. But none of the Negro League parts of it are anything we learn. So you learn these amazing things. The one thing I will give you that blew my mind was that night baseball was invented by the Kansas City Monarchs. So the idea of putting lights out to play baseball at night was a necessity of the Negro Leagues because the white teams would rent their stadiums out during Sunday and everyone would go to church because the United States, and then they'd have to play a doubleheader. Well, the second game would go into darkness. So the Negro Leagues invented the idea of putting the lights up and then putting them on trucks so you could move them to the next town because you don't own the stadium, so you're not buying it lights. And stuff like that I just think is fat and is a thing I never knew. I'm 44 years old and I didn't know why baseball has lights. Stuff like that is what I learned through this video game. And there was my long digression. But the fact that I learned that through that at 44 years of age is why I do think that Bob Kendrick and Black Diamonds is the podcast he does, is well worth it if you remotely care. Don't get me wrong. If you don't care at all about baseball or American pop culture, it's not going to change your religion. But I do think he's a brilliant storyteller and doing a hard work to try to make those things something that's in the American fabric.
I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to listen to one or two of these episodes. Which ones would you recommend?
I'm going to say, because I'm just starting it out myself, is I'm trying to see if he did the story of Satchel Paige. Satchel Paige is the absolute most famous Negro League baseball player in the United States. And he has some amazing stories. In the video game, the Satchel Paige stuff was the stuff that really got a hold of me, where I was like, oh my goodness, because it's such abject racism and hatred fought by such incredible play on the field. And using that, saying, if you think I'm less than a person, here, just hit this ball. And there's something about that that's like a very American thing of using the stupidest thing on earth, baseball, to fight institutional racism. We're still working. We've hardly beaten it. But there are bright moments where you can see it. And I would say check any of that stuff out. The Satchel Paige stuff is probably not a bad place to start, because whatever you learn, you're going to learn a little bit about American culture, because he is the one name that Americans will know from that league.
That sounds amazing. I am honestly definitely going to check out 1 or 2 episodes. And I've asked you so many questions. At this point, I like to turn it over to you as the question of the day. Question of the day. Here's a little question before we go on our way. So a question to me and potentially anyone watching. What would you like to know, Bruce?
What is the interaction that you hope people have when playing your games? You have, through time, designed what I'll call odd games. You seem to have looked for things that are in the borders. What is the hope? What is your sort of design hope for people that play your games?
This is a cop-out answer, but I feel it differs very much game to game. I mean, Seize the Power, it's a game that I hope people play and then they reflect on real life issues. I hope that sometimes it's just, I hope that people laugh. In a bind, or now it's known as Yogi, or, there might be a prequel or a rebrand. Totally hypothetically, yeah. I'm not sure I'm allowed. But I just hope that people laugh. Similarly, with a game about wee whimsical creatures and trying to identify them after some mixed noises. What I'm hoping, I guess, that my games do is that they encourage people to go through a thought process and go through a set of considerations or a set of actions that they otherwise wouldn't have done. That's, I guess, at the heart of it. It's like, I don't think anyone would ever have put their hands on top of their head and tried to draw a card if it wasn't for Yogi. And I like to believe that people wouldn't ever be complimenting a compliment, which sounds ridiculous, and it kind of is, but then you kind of think about it and I think, you know what? That actually validates the compliments, and that makes me think about what giving a good compliment is all about. And then you take that into your own life, and there's value in doing things that you otherwise wouldn't have done. I mean, obviously there's a limit to that. I'm not saying, hey, do literally everything. I mean, I'm not encouraging people to go out and commit all the crimes and atrocities, but in a nice world, I hope that people get something of value, whether that's a laugh because of a unique action or a slightly different mind process, or just like jumping through a slightly different mental hoop. I mean, something as simple as a game about quickly matching words to pictures, but never words to words or pictures to pictures. People play that and they say, hey, this is quite similar to Dobble, right? Or, hey, this is quite similar to Snap. Or, hey, this is quite similar to Jungle Speed. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. It is a real-time game where you are matching things. Absolutely. And there's a whole bunch of games like this. But firstly, there's parts that I'm proud of with you take off 2 cards and there could be like 2 matches straight away, but it's just jumping your brain through a slightly different hoop, which hopefully for that game, which is meant to be fun, it's something that kids can get into, but it tickles your brain in a new way. I guess that's what it is. Like I think there's value in novelty, and hopefully if people play it like a couple of times and then are like, you know what, that was fun, but I don't need to play it again. I feel like I've done something good there.
I think that sounds like a noble and high purpose.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
But to everyone else out there, if you're designing games, what do you hope for? And if you're sharing games with other people, what do you hope that other people get out of it? And at this point, I'd like to say over to you. What are you up to? You can share what's if you want to. What are you up to today? I am going to, try and do some stuff for getting ready for UK Games Expo, which basically means trying to get some stuff finished and illustrated that still isn't, and I'm running behind schedule. And hopefully tomorrow I will be able to relax and go out and just be with people. I'm probably going to have a wee bit of a late night. I'm going to make sure I care for myself, the typical showering, brushing my teeth, getting outside. But basically, it's just getting a bunch of stuff done for UK Games Expo, and yeah, cooking myself a meal. What are you up to? Let us know.
I know for me, I am gonna stop propping myself up against things here and probably get some more sleep and keep recovering from COVID because I'm at the very end. I can almost feel what being a normal person is again. So I will probably spend most of my day laying in my bed playing MLB The Show because it requires virtually no brain whatsoever and no activity.
I mean,
do this.
I am so honored to have you here, like, at this ridiculous hour for you. Yoda is helping their son pack for a school trip to London. That's
Nice.
amazing. Does your let us know if your son likes playing board games and wants to come to Friday daytime playtesting or anything. But I hope that they have a wonderful time. And I think you know my well, if you don't know my email or whatever, then I am Stuff by Bez in all of the places, and you can message me on Twitter or whatever. But let us recap and wrap up before we finish up. We talk, well, this has just been a ridiculous long tangent. And we started talking about North Star Games, and then the Party Gamecast, the podcasts featuring the Party Gamecast, the podcast about party games, like games you take to parties.
Close enough.
And we talked about things being accessible, noisy, or being a spectacle, 3 players or more, having high interaction. Drop in and drop out ability might be nice to have, but it doesn't make it necessarily a good party game or a bad party game if it doesn't have it. But it has to have high energy. It has to be few rules, like as simple as you can.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about Quincy Jones and the Thriller album, but you know what? I might put that on afterwards. And we talked about Connect for Spin, where it's got the...
That's so great.
That is
you might have sold that to me.
Hey, I won the 4 in a row. And
nice.
Red one. We talked about beer pong and cornhole and kitty cataclysm and carrots in the box and win, lose, banana, and maybe things should be basically all about the good vibes and everyone being involved, because we talked about Fork and Mega City Oceana, neither of which are party games, but Mega City Oceana does feel like it could be, like if it was massively simplified, it could be a party game.
Massively simplified.
Oh, yeah, but, you know, we talked about a game about dinosaurs going extinct and playing human games. We talked about things that facilitate conversation, maybe laughing at things and not knowing whether people around you are actually racist, but then conversational games which aren't party games because you can't put them on everyone, but it's a lovely thing to play with your friends at a more, let's call it, selective party. That sounds horrible, but we talked about games involving sexual stuff and touching, and like even with that, and I mean that is actually quite a big amount of touching. The Happy Salmon, the eponymous Happy Salmon.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, that I think is more fine, but I imagine that's the bit that's really freaked out some people.
In the demo, you demo that for someone and do it and you watch their face. I can tell you for me, that was the thing. It was the hardest thing to try to explain to demoers was when you do this, watch their face. If you see that they are visibly uncomfortable, give them an out immediately so they don't feel like they're locked in, because we always did these at conventions. So people felt like once they started a demo, they were into the demo, especially if it was a literal 2-minute demo.
Yeah.
But monitoring that thing, and especially on the Happy Salmon, where I would usually get each person to do it with me so I could try to gauge from their face if I thought they were going to be okay, and would ask questions and say, are you comfortable with this? Just to make sure. But yeah, absolutely.
I mean, consent is such an important thing. And I think, I mean, myself, I hope that I probably need to write a bigger, better, hey, everyone helping me remember that we really want to get people playing my games, but if they don't like my games, we want them away as soon as possible. I mean, if they want to sit down and color in stuff, we will have actually a table for coloring in stuff, which is quite cute.
Nice.
But unless people want to be at the stand, they shouldn't be at the stand. No one should feel like they're obligated to stay just because they started chatting to you. We talked about trivia and kind of borders. And we talked about Banana Ball and liking cute pictures of animals being happy with each other, helping people find joy and connecting with something that they might not have been interested in, black diamonds, coffee, getting you up in the morning, having rainbow umbrellas and cool versions of mundane things, and then with a game show, noticing what's important, why am I wrong or right, having that clarity, getting the rules out quickly and accurately, and feel like, oh, anything could happen, but you are actually bolted by rails. I mean, the idea of a Disney ride is such a good one for those things, but ultimately the questions to ask are, is it fun? Does it have a purpose? And that applies to so much things in life. If it doesn't, then maybe, don't be doing it. Analyze why you're doing the things. And then talking about the brilliance of storylines and Satchel Paige. So at this, and I talked about why I make games. So at this point, I want to thank everyone if you felt like this was of value. And Dutch Oda says, I think the schedule is fully packed, so I doubt he'll have the time. That's totally
Makes
fine.
sense.
But I hope your son has a wonderful time in London.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say thank you very much, everyone, for being here, whether you're commenting along or whether you're lurking. I appreciate you being here, and I'm always amazed that so many people choose to spend a bit of time watching. Most importantly, thank you very much to Bruce. And Bruce, if people want to find you on the internet, where exactly would you like them to go?
Easiest place to probably find me is on Twitter at BruceCoThinks. To a lesser extent at Party Gamecast, but I monitor the Brusco Thinks all the time. That is going to be the easiest way to reach out to me and find me easily. Also, if you take a look, all the links, partygamecast.com, you can find episodes about the Party Gamecast featuring the Party Gamecast podcast about party games and games you take to parties. You say the whole thing. It's like a Tribe Called Quest. I'm also on board games. If you want to hear me occasionally bring the intellectual level of that show down as hard as I possibly can. Or if you want to hear me talk about games where you flick things, I'm also on the Spiel. I do all of the Spielathons. I also occasionally do flicking around on the Spiel. And if you want to hear my weird, strange perspective on sports, check out Just Barely Sports. And you can see the links right there. Bez has put the link up. Just Barely Sports, wherever your fine podcasts are sold. If you want to hear a person rant about how amazing a logo is that a professional baseball player has to wear, that is a biscuit, United States biscuit, not British biscuit, more like a scone. Think of it like a scone on a hat. A scone with googly eyes and a butter pat mouth. And that person, as a professional future baseball player, is obligated to wear that. And that is one of the things I love about this country. So if you want to get that unique perspective, check out Just Barely Sports with the Minor League Geek.
And the only thing left for me to say at this point is lots of love to everyone, and bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Blue, blue, bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. Now it's time to go. Bye, 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 bye. This is a goodbye song. Bye, 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 bye. Thank you for watching along. Bye, 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 bye. This is the end of the show. Bye, 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 bye. And now it's time to go. Bye, bye, everyone.